coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
This kind of thing might be a dimension of a healthy republic. In a world where we do actually trust our officials, we do trust them to give us like the best approximation of what we need to know, not actually the maximal information about everything that's going on, especially in issues that deal with national security or with the military. Like a certain degree, the optimal level of secrecy in a healthy government is not zero. And so you do really rely on some degree of trustworthiness in your officials at some point. It's just that once that's broken down, it's not clear what to replace it with. And so then you get some people flying stuff over airspace, and all of a sudden, every theory seems as plausible as every other. And this is how real conspiracy craziness, which genuinely does psychically derange people, starts to take hold. So it really is kind of the wages of a lack of transparency in bureaucracy creating this situation that drives people a little bit crazy. Hello, and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast from the American Mind. I'm your host, Spencer Clavin, associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books and nicotine pouch editor of the American Mind. One of my buddies has at last handed me the poison fruit that all Gen Z males are into, and in my status as honorary member of Generation Z, despite being a millennial, I am utterly hooked. I'm chewing on one right now. I'm not sure what to say about it exactly, but if I seem even more manic than usual, that's why. I'm joined this week by managing editor Mike Sabo and publisher and president Ryan Williams for our last episode of the year. The next 2 Wednesdays are going to be Christmas and New Year's Day, respectively. So we, like all right-thinking people, are going to hang up our hats, spend some time with family, celebrate the birth of our Lord, etc. And we'll get into a little bit of end-of-year stuff down the line at the end of this episode. But first, we've got a couple last topics to hit in this eventful year. Things have not slowed down. Time and tide wait for no man and no holiday. Right now, the big online story is about drones, mysterious drones. When I set out to research this topic, I thought, oh, this is something that's just hit the news cycle, like maybe this week or end of last week. But no, in fact, this is almost a month now that this has been going on. A number of mysterious drones were spotted flying over New Jersey. They started in New Jersey, and then there were other spottings kind of around the eastern U.S., and as you may imagine, there has been some very hinged and normal speculation about what these drones might be for. Everyone is keeping himself or herself very much within the bounds of reason. Oh, no, wait, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. That's a different timeline. On our timeline, what's happening is that everybody and his mother has a take about what these are. They range from, these are U.S. government tested drones flying over our airspace. They're trying to work out some new technology, perhaps see if they can run some tests to surprise our bases and see whether it's possible to sneak up on American bases with drones. Alternatively, perhaps these are foreign military equipment. Iran maybe has been floated. I gather that they are in possession of a few ships that are basically like aircraft carriers for drones, and people have wondered whether that's where these are coming from. In part, I think because they seem to be flying in formation and for longer times than usual kind of recreational drones have typically been able to. And so, of course, there are even further afield ideas. For instance, what if it's aliens? What if it's demons masquerading as aliens? I'm sure I'm missing some major good ones, and you guys can add in your own personal favorites. But this has reached as high as Donald Trump, who definitely thinks there's something fishy about this. He has said to reporters, there's been talk of trying to shoot them out of the sky. And of course, there's also been a lot of nothing to see here from the Biden administration. At the same time, not a lot of information seems to be on offer or even perhaps in the possession of officials and authorities. If they're telling us everything they know, they don't seem to know very much. But with these things, there's always the possibility that there's stuff that's not being said for legitimate security reasons, as well as the more zany ideas that perhaps aliens have already made contact with us and that they're just trying to hide it more and more desperately as the evidence mounts. But I've perhaps been too flippant. I don't mean to cut you guys off in advance. Do you think it's aliens? What do you think is going on here? And what do you make of the online furor about it?
One of our beloved senior administrative staff asked the question today, what's the wisdom of Claremont on this? Is it aliens?
Yep.
A theory propounded by our chief financial officer, but mostly in jest. And I said it was either people are just starting to notice these drones more and more people have them. They had the CEO of one of the drone companies on some show. It doesn't really matter. And he was saying, I don't think they're Chinese spy planes. They all have like FAA approved lights on them. He was talking about the ones over New Jersey. So I think it could be that more people have them, more people are flying them, more people are noticing them. And then it was reported this morning maybe that, at least from another one of our staffers, we have a California contingent, a Texas contingent, a DC contingent, and then some folks spread out all over. So our longtime employee, I'll leave her nameless because I didn't ask her permission ahead of time, but she said it's confirmed that now drones are over Iowa. So I think the two plausible explanations, maybe one more plausible than the other. The first one, a little less plausible. People are just noticing them more. And the noticing of them in the story over New Jersey has spread, as everything does these days, quickly in mimetic fashion over social media. So now more people are looking everywhere and they're seeing an army of drones in the sky. Or it's just the US government conducting a series of tests over rural, suburban, and more urban places. And they don't want to tell us about it because they're figuring out how to tell us about it. And they would rather our enemies not know about it. And so, yeah, those are my two leading theories. Also, there's I forget, I'm going to talk about the Pod Save America podcast later, but they talked about drones too. And, they're sensible guys, especially on less political stuff, because they're just smart observers of things. And one of them was, they dug into it a bit, and a lot of people are reporting what are clearly airplanes as drones. A lot of people are reporting celestial bodies as drones, stars, planets.
Which, if you really think about it,
yeah,
is a celestial body, not very high powered drone.
A very immobile, very far away drone. Yes. Yeah. But I will say, Spencer, about 8 months ago, I was outside late at night. I blacked out, and when I woke up, I have a vague memory of a cavernous metallic inside of a drone, I think. I don't know.
Hey, you too? That's crazy. I thought that was just me. Mike, have you an alien abduction to report?
Yeah, you know what? I've seen them, but they've all been on the X-Files, so I have not had that happen to me personally, but of course have seen it on the X-Files and movies and all that. And this is totally, Ryan, you touched on the celestial bodies. I mean, what if the stars are just, angels that are really far away? I've heard that like in theological discourse and, medieval times and all that. So, I mean, that's quite another possibility. Could be out there, but it could be true. Who knows? My guess is with this, I think it's a combination of things that you mentioned. I mean, I think it's probably more than likely it's people seeing helicopters, small aircraft, that kind of thing. I think, and maybe just confusing it for drones would be my guess. There was a congressman, a New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew. He blamed it on, there's some Iranian mothership that's sending out drones from the ocean. Obviously you can't really trust what the Biden administration says. I mean, but still, that would really, really surprise me. So I think it's just kind of confirmation bias. It's kind of telephone. It's just who we are as human beings. Somebody sees something, they look then, and they think that they see that same thing too. So that's kind of my guess. Trump said when asked, he said there might be something going on. The military is not really going to say, but he wants to kind of get into it. I hope if there is something going on that he does say, just like with what's going on with JFK, what happened there, and a bunch of other things. I hope kind of the documents do get released on a lot of those things. Because I think part of this is when there's a buildup of bureaucracy, when our government has done the things that they've done over decades and decades and decades. There's just such a breakdown in trust. Nobody believes anything anymore. So this is kind of the end result of that, right? Nobody's going to believe the official narrative at all anymore. So this is kind of it opens up a problem of this is what happens kind of at the final stages, I guess, of bureaucratic managerial government is you just get a breakdown in just reality. We can't even agree on even that anymore. So I think that that's part of it too. And there was actually an interesting thing, Upward News, they noted the Washington Post. I guess, this kind of thing has happened before. The Washington Post reported in 1979 that I guess about 4 years previously, around our nation's kind of nuclear missile launch sites and bomber bases, I guess there were these like weird, unidentified, low-flying objects. This was according to the Defense Department. The Air Force like attempted to kind of figure out what it was, even go after these objects, and they couldn't. More than likely, they were just helicopters. But this kind of thing I think has happened throughout human history. It's a typical thing again. And, we'll see. I mean, if it really is something, I hope Trump can get to the bottom of it and let everybody know what's actually going on.
Do you guys know about the famous debut of H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds on radio?
Yes.
And like a good portion of the population thinking we were actually getting invaded by aliens.
Yep.
Yeah, right. I mean, to me, Mike, what you said about lack of trust is what this story is actually about. This is not a story about drones. This is like a socio-cultural story about late stage progressivism, essentially. That at the end of this long, decades long kind of grinding down of social trust, where we just find out more and more stuff that the government is actually keeping from us, isn't telling us the truth about, and doesn't have our best interests in mind about, but is actually kind of cloaking itself in this elaborate network of inscrutable agencies, you develop a situation where people see anything as a potential marker of vast secret conspiracies. I was hanging out with my parents over the weekend, and we were talking about vaccine hesitancy and skepticism, how in between the maximalist, all vaccines give you autism and we need to bring back polio or whatever, and then on the other hand, shoot me up with everything, govern me harder, daddy. In between these two extremes, there lies now an enormous gray area of people that are like, well, I don't know what to believe, and I don't know who to ask to get a straight answer from, because the COVID debacle kind of revealed that there are a lot of people in positions of supposed authority ready to tell you so-called noble lies. They want you to think so that they can get to herd immunity or whatever marker they actually have in their mind. And it strikes me as interesting in a dark sort of way that this kind of thing might be a dimension of a healthy republic. In a world where we do actually trust our officials, we do trust them to give us like the best approximation of what we need to know, not actually the maximal information about everything that's going on, especially in issues that deal with national security or with the military. Like a certain degree, the optimal level of secrecy in a healthy government is not zero. And so you do really rely on some degree of trustworthiness in your officials at some point. It's just that once that's broken down, it's not clear what to replace it with. And so then you get some people flying stuff over airspace, and all of a sudden, every theory seems as plausible as every other. And this is how real conspiracy craziness, which genuinely does psychically derange people, starts to take hold. So it really is kind of the wages of a lack of transparency in bureaucracy creating this situation that drives people a little bit crazy. I have a question about what seems to me, and it sounds like you guys agree, is like the most likely scenario, right? So all things being equal, it's probably like a government test of something, or just more drones being kind of visible and people waking up to it. But if it's a government test, this seems like a really crowded area to be doing a government test over. So there are actually kind of interesting unanswered questions for me, even in the domain of the most plausible scenario. Like, why not do this in some remote, deserted location where people aren't going to start speculating and asking questions? Is there some reason for that?
Mel, I mean, we all remember the closing scenes of Goodfellas when Ray Liotta is all hopped up on cocaine and seeing helicopters everywhere. So it is over New Jersey, Spencer. So I'm rewatching The Sopranos for the fourth time now, which I still maintain, controversial hot take, is still the peak of prestige television. And it also gets funnier with every watch, especially for those of you comfortable with like rampant ethnic jokes. Anyway, just a plug for The Sopranos. I will flag one thing about it that I really love, and it's on the more serious side, not the ethnic joke side, which is the moral decline of Carmela. That's one of the great themes of that show. If you've seen it a couple times and can just binge a lot of it, it's a pretty good tale of moral corruption. Anyway, yeah, so maybe they just want to scare the Goombas over in New Jersey by pretending to surveil them all at night. I don't know. If any of our Italian listeners, forgive me.
Yeah, one of the more like, I don't know, gray area conspiracy theories is why are they testing this out? A month away from the inauguration of a hugely controversial
Mm-hmm.
president. I think the young woman who has replaced Brett Cooper on the comment section, I'm forgetting her name, but she sort of raised that question. And this is all like, again, sort of legitimate area for speculation. And it doesn't help that this is one of those places where when you speculate, you get called all sorts of evil names. But also, yeah, it's also one of those areas where you can imagine a lot of plausible answers that are not sinister. I do feel that just as we can't get out of this podcast without a little bit of New Jersey bashing, we probably also can't get out of this segment without some of our patented tinfoil hat wearing speculation about aliens. And this is just to say that, like, it's not actually out of pocket to associate the heavenly bodies and strange anomalies in the heavens with supernatural activity. This is Dante, right? I mean, there's like a whole long medieval Christian tradition of saying, well, actually, there are more things in heaven and earth, and our experience of the natural world is kind of mediated also through supernatural interventions and experiences. I just feel like this is probably not the time that the aliens have made contact with us. Like, there are other things that seem more alien coded and more
Yeah,
demon.
no. If they're sophisticated enough to get here from some habitable planet, which means they must be able to travel at light speed or go through wormholes or whatever. I mean, the world's a mess. They'd be able to observe everything. Why would they want to descend on? I mean, I guess we'd be weakened for conquering, but then they have to manage all this. I mean, I guess if they're just coming to wipe us all out, that's one thing. But
Right. I mean, I get the vision of, that old Twilight episode, Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, where they'd be probably more apt just to kind of set up traps and kind of watch us kind of destroy ourselves and not actually do what is an odd thing that if this actually really is them, what they seem to be doing, which is being here for months, kind of slowly observing, but letting us see them, see their craft, whatever. I saw something where, it had even gone over Trump's golf course in New Jersey. So, like you said, Spencer, it's it's going over some interesting places, and the timing is kind of strange. Also, I saw that there have been sightings over an air base in Germany, Ramstein, and then I think in Ohio too, right? Patterson Air Force Base. I think that was the one which is right close to me, right, a little bit north, about an hour. So I don't know if, again, that's just human beings being human beings, or if there's something possibly more going on here. But this is, I think, a thing where, look, all conspiracy theories aren't necessarily a bad thing. I think that has kind of been, that term has usually typically a term of abuse, but it's something to talk about, something interesting. Again, we'll see if it really is something. Trump will hopefully let us know about that.
it also portends a dark and surrealistic and dystopian future of warfare. I mean, imagine if the Battle of the Blitz was not Spitfires. Really, that wasn't happening at night, but like nighttime bombing of London and surrounding cities was conducted not by somewhat high-flying German bombers where you could hide from them in a shelter, but 5 million drones of all sizes. I don't know, maybe that's too outrageous and outlandish, but I commend everyone to listen to. He's been doing a bunch of podcasts lately, but I thought one of the more compact editions, which was very interesting, it was Mark Andreessen on the Free Press's podcast, Barry Weiss's podcast, and he talks about just the transformation of warfare that's happening quickly and accelerating with the marriage of AI and drones. And I mean, I gave the example of a swarm wreaking havoc on a city, But the one he talked about, which I hadn't really thought about, was, but I should have, it's sort of common sense, is, they're getting very fast. Airplane drones are getting more and more sophisticated. So he said, fighter pilots will be a thing no more, bomber pilots probably as well at some point. And he said, there's no human being in there. There's no sack of bones and flesh in there. So they can go a lot faster. I mean, they could go Mach 6 or Mach 10 or whatever. Their only limit is going to be propulsion technology. So we're in for, let's hope, not a world war where we test all this on a grand scale, but certainly an interesting and somewhat frightening future.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, the reality is probably every bit as dystopic as one could wish. There's no need to invent kind of extravagant scenarios. You can just sort of speculate about the actual future of warfare. Well, I'm sure, as they say, more will be revealed. It's probably imprudent to continue speculating lest we venture into like wild territory. I guess we already did, but we'll put a pin in that and talk about some slightly more concrete news items, beginning with our new favorite lib podcast. We have a new obsession here on the Roundtable, which is Pod Save America. We love to eavesdrop on this fairly intelligent but very lefty and kind of party line podcast by these ex-Obama bros who are in the process, as many libs are, of litigating what happened in this latest election and trying to figure out what, if anything, needs changing about the Democratic approach to politics. There are some unsayables in this domain for a lot of people, including how do we walk back the trans stuff and the cultural maximalism? How do we respin our party after this defeat? But the most immediate problem on the table is that Joe Biden is still the president. I feel like I need one of those counters. Like, it has been 10 days since Joe Biden was still the president, and we have not heard from him. He really is kind of vanishing, fading into the background, much like Homer Simpson walking slowly backward into the hedge to try to disappear. And the guys on the latest episode of Pod Save America were kind of talking about what this is about, whether it's really the case, whether this is just a media confection, or if it is happening, why isn't Joe Biden taking a more active role at the end of his term? They asked, has Joe Biden stepped out of the spotlight, or has the spotlight just moved away from Joe Biden? And this is one of those points where it's like, it sounds like an interesting question, but the answer is the first thing. Joe Biden has stepped out of the spotlight. He did release a memo on Sunday about some things that Biden will continue to do, one of which we'll be talking about in a bit, which is putting out more pardons besides just Hunter, more stuff on AI, more moves to protect federal land. But the tenor of the country is clearly shifting already toward the Trump presidency. Biden was absent at the big Army-Navy game. Trump was present along with some of his closest associates. And it really does kind of feel as if Trump is already the president. He's the guy that we just quoted on the drones. That's the statement that has been most interesting, most attention grabbing. And so the question is, why, and is this a good idea? The Pod Save America guys seemed discontented with Biden's hashtag resistance. It seemed like he could be doing things to make things harder for Trump. We've discussed on this podcast already some ways in which he has been doing that, has been kind of throwing a lot of problems into Trump's court. But my favorite take from the episode was that this is really because of Joe Biden's strong respect for norms. It's that in America, we only have one president, and Joe Biden, they said, with admittedly some humor, Joe Biden has chosen to let it be Trump rather than himself, who is currently president. But I know, Ryan, you're the one that brought this to our attention, so I'll throw it to you first. What did you make of this entire speculation on their part?
Yeah, well, the many stages of grief. We're at the anger stage with the losing the election with the Pod Save America guys. They're sort of lamenting the fact that we have a 4-hour a day, 3-day a week, maybe president, when what they really would like him to be doing. I mean, they acknowledge that he's pardoning a lot of people and they're all for clemency, and they raised the normal objections to a few of these folks that were on the clemency list, which we will maybe get to, but said, this was implicit. If Obama were on the way out with Trump, he'd be Trump-proofing everything. And Biden is only really all the Biden, the Democrats, the administration are doing is spending a lot of the CHIPS Act money and trying to shovel money out the door before Trump can put a stop to it or block it or whatever. And I don't think you mentioned it, Spencer, but the title of the podcast is Biden Quiet Quitting? And I think the answer has to be yes from all of us. And it's not really remarked upon much in the mainstream media, this remarkable fact pattern we have right now where the world's kind of melting down in various ways. And we have a president who maybe works 4 hours a day, as I mentioned, 5 days a week, if we're lucky, held the Hanukkah party early this year. Hanukkah's doesn't start till Christmas Day, but I think it was held on Monday. And then Biden went to Delaware, and I think he'll be there at least through Christmas. And, the world keeps spinning, yet here we are. And we have a vice president who, crawls out of the wine bottle to pop up to give a speech up in wherever she was. Was she in New Jersey again? I don't know. Forgive me, maybe in Maryland, trying to stay relevant. And we have a commander-in-chief who seems to be just relying on the machinery of modern American executive government rather than superintending the many crises across the world and some at home. So it's disconcerting. I just wanted to flag a few things, and I flagged this one last time with the Pod Save America guys, but they just keep implicitly hitting it, and I just find it interesting. Kamala is trying to decide, this is part of the setup for the story, Kamala, it seems, is trying to decide between running for governor of California in 2026 and running for president again in 2028. And one of the hosts said, this is the quote, "I think if you were to ask her what she's most passionate about, it's been domestic issues. It's been law enforcement. It has been criminal justice. It's been things she can do as governor. I think she is paid politically for having come up as a prosecutor, then run for president at a time when that was seen as a liability," they mean 2020, "and shifting to the left on a bunch of issues, and then walking away from those positions. If you were to ask me right now, what are Kamala's views, actual personal views on a host of those issues, I would say she's a consensus builder, but I don't actually know." So this was, what are you to make of this? I guess you'd expect it from veterans of the Obama administration, where it's this view of treating politics and talking blithely about politics and policy as if it's all merely a vehicle to getting elected to the next office, and just sort of without any self-awareness about it. They treat these issues as if you changed your view on, what the speed limit should be because you saw a new study. But shifting to the left on a bunch of issues like abolish the police, open the borders, give all illegals health care, being in favor of trans rights for prisoners. One of these things is not like the other. And the way they talk about it nonchalantly is just striking to me. Yeah, okay, Trump pivoted a bit on abortion, but he's basically running on the same issues he ran on in 2016 and 2020 with a little variation adapted to circumstance. But it's not like, I guess they would argue, well, his path to power was always those issues. And I don't know what the Democratic electorate is more nuanced. So Kamala has to shift like a shapeshifter with the times. I thought that was extraordinary. And then at the end of the podcast, Jon Favreau interviewed Ro Khanna, and Ro Khanna is an interesting guy, a quote unquote moderate Democrat or a pragmatist on many issues. He's, of course, his home constituency is Silicon Valley. And he said two things that I thought were worth mentioning. He was talking with Khanna on repealing the Congressional Impoundment Act that Mike Lee had signaled. For those that don't know, presidents across a lot of U.S. history, the bulk of it actually, had found it convenient from time to time to say, yes, thank you, Congress, for appropriating that money, but we got the job done for less, or I think this particular part of it is unconstitutional, so I'm not going to spend that money on that. And Nixon was involved in such shenanigans, according to the Democrats. And so Congress passed the Impoundment Act, which restricts presidents from engaging in such activity. They have a kind of 45-day window, at which point they're compelled to fulfill the office and spend the money or put people in positions. So Khanna's response to that was this, and I'll pause after this so we can discuss these two and then wrap with the last one. I say the Republicans have made the entire Federalist Papers theory not work, because the whole Federalist Papers were like, yeah, Congress is going to look out for their own power. They would never give up power to the president. Why would they do that? They weren't counting on the modern Republican Party in alliance to Trump. Now, Khanna is talking sort of about the contemporary GOP and Trump, but I took his point to be broader about the Republican Party in general. And I just want to say this is pretty rich, given the fact that the party responsible in the last 120 years for eviscerating the separation of powers, both through the standing up of the administrative state and its insulation from political control, and also through the expansion of presidential power. Just to take two examples, the Obama administration's DACA business, where they, with a wave of the hand under allegedly discretionary prosecutorial power, basically gave de facto citizenship or a path to it for millions of children of illegal immigrants. And then the Biden administration, which the Republicans are salivating about it a bit, Biden removed from various boards and independent commissions, mostly boards, a bunch of Trump appointees. And under the Democrats' theory of insulation of the bureaucracy from political control, especially on these bodies that aren't necessarily setting a bunch of policy, their view is that you can't do that removal is restricted, that the president can't just remove people who work for him, especially in these certain categories. And a couple folks sued, including Sean Spicer. And the reason they sued was to get this ruling, which they expected, given, I think, the judge they drew or the judges they were likely to draw. And they basically signed off on it with the Biden administration. So now Republicans are quite excited to use that precedent, recent though it is, to remove a bunch of Democrats. It just reminds me of one last thing about what Biden should be doing, offered by the Pod Save America bros. And that was one of the ways to Trump-proof. They caveated it. They said, I don't know if there's enough time. Maybe he couldn't, but it was kind of a DACA redux in the sense of, why doesn't Biden use the commutation power to basically legalize all the illegal aliens or their kids? Maybe don't give them citizenship, but at least, remove them from the possibility of deportation. And then finally, one last thing, John Favreau, he asks Khanna about Democrats versus Republicans and how they operate. And from Khanna, this was quite revealing to me, because he's not a hard-charging ideologue, though he may be liberal on various policies. This was Khanna's quote on how Dems operate versus Republicans. It's fine for the left to be asymmetrically better. We don't have to get in the mud. When they curse, we don't have to curse back. When they are negative, we can say no. We believe in a better vision for humanity, and we organize and we make progress. Now, the last part of that is certainly a heartfelt self-understanding of the Democrats. But the first part, after the rampant lawfare, let alone when they curse, we don't have to curse. It seemed like half the Democratic constituencies under a certain age in Congress and on TikTok and out of Congress voting for Democrats. Swearing, vulgarity, nudity, all sorts of outrageous behavior is totally par for the course. So Khanna has this weird schizophrenic mix of it seems like a decent guy. I don't know him, of course. And then also just a very odd detachment from what seemed to me to be the facts on the ground over the last year.
No, it's just some weird, because I noted that just even in a past podcast, where it's like the view that the Democrats have of themselves, it's like they're a bunch of liberal mainliners who are, all in their 60s and all nice to each other, playing cards and whatever. It's like, it's almost like Stephen Colbert. You watch that show and the audience pans out, and that's basically 75% of their audience. It's amazing, just the two-facedness about that. It's no, that is not what you see on X. That's not what you see on TikTok, Instagram, etc. Just look at October 7th came to mind right away. Look at all the kids in college campuses. That's being nice. That's sitting down, debating like gentlemen or something. Come on, that is just absurd. There's fantasies and whatever, but that is just I just don't even know what party he's talking about at the end of the day. It's just crazy. And
The Republican president said that he could accomplish legislation with a pen and a phone. Oh wait, no, sorry, that was Obama. I
right.
remember how they go low, we go low, they go high. That's it's totally a thing. That's very much the hallmark of the Democrat Party.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like you could come up with example after example after example of this. I just that still stuns me because you just hear that constantly. You heard that from Kamala. You heard that from just how she kind of comported herself in the debates and all that. And it's such a facade. I mean, luckily, Americans obviously are seeing through that. That the majority of them clearly don't buy it with Trump winning the popular vote. Another thing with the podcast, just kind of listening to it, I mean, they have this kind of weird idea where if we were just like almost maximally progressive and that's what we should be, like we would win. And I've kind of heard that in the past, like pre-Trump Republican Party, there were people I knew, friends I knew who'd kind of say that, like, oh, we just need to cast aside Mitt Romney. He's some lib. Okay, granted, but then we just need to be kind of this Reaganite, absolutely maximal conservative platform, zombie Reaganism, and we would absolutely win. We would sweep it. It would be like 1984 morning in America all over again. I mean, I thought that was kind of right at that time, but then obviously Trump totally blew that imagery and idea away for me. But it's amazing that the Dems, even at the highest levels, kind of still have that view. And to me, that is a fatal weakness. And that showed up obviously in 2024. And I think if they don't really look and analyze, I mean, I don't know, even so, they may win in 2028, depending on the candidate. I was actually just reading something in Politico that says even some seniors, Democrat staffers, even higher than that, just leadership in the Democratic Party, are actually interested in Kamala running again. Which is either they're just saying that, they're who knows why. That could be for a number of factors. So that's interesting that her name is being floated and connected to 2028 again. But if the Democrats at least don't make some kind of change and do something else, I mean, things aren't going to look good for them in 2028. So.
Oh, I say by all means, Kamala 2028 all the way. I'm with her for all of it.
Me too.
Yeah,
Totally. I mean, I think they should rerun Hillary again myself. So
I think
we'll
that's
see.
part of the prospectus is this. I mean, I have no idea how serious these reports are, but
No.
it does speak to a theme we've touched upon before, which is the inability to really internalize and process the total collapse of the left wing media ecosystem. I mean, it's like the whole air that they've constructed for themselves of imaginary fabrication that the Democrats are these faultless, spotless, small r Republicans committed to the founding principles of the country, and the Republicans are just these raging bulls tearing everything apart. That is something that they convinced themselves of and for a while could maintain as an appearance until new media broke through that. And if they still can't realize that that has happened, I think that will be totally fatal for them. I suspect that's probably that would be too good. I might wish that would happen, but these are not stupid people. They will catch wise. It's just that they are doing a lot of denial. I mean, you always have to kind of save face when you change your mind in politics. So some of
Right.
this, it's like you have to pretend you're not actually changing your mind in the process of changing your mind. But no, I like this is a castle built on air at this point. The idea that they can get out of this without some serious introspection, I think.
And that's why I hesitate to say, oh, it's over for the Democrats. I mean, they're just almost a new party is going to have to rise or something like that. Like, look, they could win in 2028. They could win in 2032, even without doing a lot of things that we think that they need to do in order to kind of forge a bigger coalition, whatever. I mean, it's very possible, but it's just amazing to me, just the hubris, the just inability to just kind of see the obvious, from people who, again, are otherwise intelligent. I mean, these people won national elections, many elections, I'm sure, even before that, on the state level too, I'm sure. So, colleges they went to, etc. So, I mean, they're not dumb, but they just believe so many things that just plainly aren't so.
These pardons that we mentioned them in passing, but we should just kind of put some meat on the bones of what actually is going on here. Biden has commuted 1,499 sentences and issued 39 pardons. There's a really good piece by Jim Garrity in National Review kind of laying out who some of these people are. He mentions that this may well be an attempt to kind of cover over the Biden or the Hunter Biden pardon and make it seem as if this is just one among a number of people that's being kind of let off the hook. If that's true, it seems like a totally futile effort. I mean, none of these people is as high profile as Hunter Biden, and the motivations there are so obviously different. But there is also a genuine like act of political and civic irresponsibility going on here. Garrity kind of goes on to detail who some of these people are. There's Michael Conahan, known for the Kids for Cash scandal, sending juvenile defendants to private for-profit detention centers in exchange for $2.1 million in kickbacks. There's the former Cuyahoga, I'm not sure how to
Cuyahoga.
Yeah, Cuyahoga County.
That's where I grew up.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So
I know that story.
This guy Jimmy Demora, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about him. And
yeah, no, I mean Cuyahoga County, that's where Cleveland is. I mean, just famous, I think, for corruption, especially on that level of the county commissioner. So in this case, I mean, this guy had obviously been a staple of the local Democratic Party for a very long time. Made, I think, in total, Garrity said like $450,000 off bribes, trips to Las Vegas, prostitutes, of course. He built himself some like outdoor stone-fired pizza oven in the backyard of his home in a suburb of Cleveland. So, I mean, just one of those cases. Just like, when you think of Cleveland, you think Dennis Kucinich was mayor when the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. Jimmy Demora, at least, it's a smaller story, but within Cleveland, I mean, that's just Jim Trafficant, same thing. And like, another Democrat who's in prison. Just a parade of these guys that just, I mean, are just kind of almost ashamed to be connected with them in any way.
Well, we do want to get onto our end of year segment, but before we do, let's just touch on one somewhat minor, although it may be revealing thing that Mike sent by. The headline of this is fellas, is it gay to sleep? We've got Andrew Tate, noted manosphere, I guess, social media personality, who gets on X and says, top line, sleeping soundly is for overtly homosexual men. The world is at war, people are dying, and BTC breaks a new ATH every day. Money moving in every single direction. Elections are overthrown in democratic nations, and you have zero anxiety. This would be unremarkable, except that there is a new trend of debating online, like what true masculinity is, that is sort of shorn of all the usual, and I would say really quite Christianized idea about the good man as a steward of a household, as devoted to one wife. I mean, before this, Tate and Nick Fuentes and a few others have said like it's gay or feminine to really love one woman because you should just be sleeping around all the time. I find all of this kind of intriguing, and at a sociological level, it's not actually just somebody as silly as Andrew Tate. It is sort of part of this new rise of the post-Christian or anti-Christian right, which has been written about. I mean, Ross Douthat, our friend Nate Hochman has written about this. I'm actually going to be watching in 2025 and beyond, like whether this is a viable force in American politics, whether the excesses of feminism and the decay, I would say, of American public Christianity, not the actual Christian teaching, but the misuse of it to encourage all manner of passivity and senility and sort of decline, whether that really will create a serious surge in anti-ethical so-called conservative politics. I mean, what do you guys think? Am I making too much out of this Andrew Tate tweet?
Well, we should mention why to bring up Andrew Tate. A good portion of our listeners will know, but some maybe not. He and his brother have been accused in Romania of making a good portion of their fortune. Andrew's a former MMA fighter, which helps, I guess, get him some street cred in the manliness online crowd. He's, fairly formidable physical specimen. But he and his brother have been accused of using cam girls, for those of you that know that phrase, the whole cadre of them to make their fortune by running basically a bunch of cam girls online and collecting a lot of their traffic earnings. I'm oversimplifying, but anyway, but he's quite popular with a certain subset of American conservatives, men, especially under the sort of under 25 crowd, and not just only conservative men. So he's a bit of a phenomenon and influential in his own online way. So worth considering. I mean, I just the whole post. I mean, he's click farming, of course, and engagement farming with all of these sorts of things. He likes to be provocative, so there's a bit of that. The funniest part to me was, oh, you sleep 9 hours a night? You're totally vulnerable for someone killing you. Your wife will look over and see you drooling and snoring, and she'll feel like she could stab you in the neck, and probably kind of wants to because you're clearly lame and homosexual. I don't know. I mean, so he does. It's kind of a shticky thing he does, and it's amusing. But yeah, I don't know how much purchase it has. But I think the phenomenon you identify, Spencer, is an interesting one, and one we've tried to engage with a little bit at the American Mind, especially in the early days, giving Bronze Age Pervert the chance to reply to Michael Anton's somewhat negative review of his book in the Claremont Review of Books. And Mike's main point was, look, he sort of dodges the question that has plagued Western political philosophy since the dawn of time, or the dawn of somewhat Western civ time anyway, going all the way back to ancient Greece, which is you have all the normal problems of justice and politics. It's fine in a corrupt age to praise the pirate, the manly pirate, but you can't found a regime on that. You run into the normal succession problems as ever. And Mike was basically making the case that, especially in a post-Christian world, it's pretty hard to not defend somewhat fulsomely the arrangement of offices and the position of justice and the elevation of natural rights and natural law as the basis of political legitimacy in America. One can critique it, but Mike found the critique from Nietzschean Bronze Age Pervert uncompelling, but the appeal of such a critique or similar critiques from maybe the traditionalist sphere, not nihilistic, but rather anti-Republican and anti-democratic and anti-modern. So there's the two sides of that. Yeah, there's the unethical or ethics neutral side of the right, or a portion of the right, or the young right, or we'll see. A lot of these kids will grow out of it, I think, especially as they have families and communities and jobs. But it's certainly something to watch.
I just thought of especially one famous album, the BC Boys, No Sleep Till Brooklyn. So with Tate, it should be no sleep ever. Motorhead, they had a famous live album, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Again, no sleep. They're just going to be playing forever. There's actually a famous Stephen King short story about that, where Elvis was still alive in this small town, kind of cut off, and they just having a concert forever. And it's actually quite horrifying. It's actually probably one of the most horrifying stories I've ever read from him. But yeah, I mean, this infatuation with Tate, look, I get it. It's connected to the drone story. It's all about looking for authority in a world where you don't trust anybody. Problem with Tate is obviously he is certainly not the one to follow. And you have two things going on. I think you have Tate and this kind of, post-Christian, Aaron Renz kind of described it as a negative world in a way. The negative world, I guess, is the way that kind of the regime or the society kind of looks at Christianity. This is then kind of connected to it because it's then kind of the outgrowth. It's kind of like the anti-Christian man. Possibly Nietzsche's Last Man. I don't know. Probably not in a way. I'd have to think about that more. But there's some connection to that. But then you see on the other side what's happening is a kind of, say, in the Protestant world that I'm familiar with, kind of going back to the sources, going back to the reformers and their second, third generation and their heirs, and really recovering a lot of the kind of political theology, political principles, how to think about politics rightly.
Manly Protestantism, even maybe.
Yeah, Mainly Protestantism, a vitalism. There was Christian Winter, who's a guy I actually didn't know at Hillsdale, but he went to Hillsdale. He wrote a essay about this over at American Reformer that I would definitely recommend to this audience too. It provides just an interesting window into that world and what's going on, and you have these worlds kind of colliding and clashing, and it'll be interesting to see who wins out. I mean, certainly, I think the Tate audience is certainly much more. But as we've seen, I mean, smaller audiences, minorities can certainly win and put pressure on the majority. So we'll see what happens. But this is a battle that will continue brewing, and there'll be fighting and everything for the foreseeable future.
We should add, too, that alongside the attraction of Tate amongst men under 30 has also been the resurgence of religiosity among men under 30 in America and in other parts of the West, France and elsewhere. So yep. It's a live issue for sure, and a contested one.
Yeah, it speaks to this really large question that we have always really been concerned with on this podcast, but I think will especially be in the 4 years to come. It's obvious that we live in an age of iconoclasm. It's clear that something really decrepit and dead needs to be swept away from American life. And that thing, whatever it is deeply structural. That is, it's embedded into our assumptions and into the way our government operates. But the burning question becomes, once you've swept that thing away, what are you trying to go back and recover? Is it some pre-modern, pre-Christian, even pagan warlordism, or is it the true meaning of the American founding, which of course includes a hefty dose of manly Protestantism among other things? So it's a good issue, I think, for the Claremont Institute to be talking about, since our whole brief is that the thing you actually want to recover is American liberty rightly understood. And this is a good segue actually into our last little lightning round segment here, which is, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's our last episode of the year. It's been quite a 2024, I must say, for all of us, but certainly for the Roundtable. Very eventful. We've enjoyed every minute of it, I think, if I can speak for all of us. It's always a blast and a privilege to talk to our listeners out there, to hear from you, to meet you in person. The number one thing I hear about this podcast is, when I listen to you guys, I realize I'm not crazy, that there is like a conversation going on in a lot of people's heads that we are grateful to be able to host in a larger forum and on the air. So we just wanted to take a quick look back and ultimately forward to what comes next. I will say that for me, the story of the year really is the collapse of the narrative machine that for so long we've been fighting against, that we have felt since we started this podcast and before, that there's a kind of underdog quality to conservative media and the conservative viewpoint, rightly understood, because there's so much institutional capture of the academy, of the major networks, of the legacy press outlets, all of which create this kind of surround sound propaganda megaphone that you are always in an atmosphere and an ecosystem that is created and set by the enemies of America, the American founding, and by a kind of neo-Marxist left. That situation has now radically changed, and it was changing all along, but in the way of these things, like bankrupts going bankrupt, or like the formation of stars, it happens slowly and then suddenly all at once. With the election and with Trump's appearance, especially on Joe Rogan, but also his very savvy use of traditional political ads and things like that to highlight the madness of the Democrat Party and the Kamala Harris ticket. Now we live in a world where as Elon Musk likes to say, you are the media, which is not to say that anything goes, but simply that we no longer need to rely upon so-called official sources of so-called information. There's dangers to that, but there's also an enormous amount of opportunity to build. And much of that, I suspect, will not actually be the direct action of the Trump administration, although that's important. Much of it will be people in local communities and at the state level really trying to reestablish a sensible, moderate, prudent, but vigorous ordered liberty. So cheers to that. And I'm excited about it. What do you guys think?
It was a remarkable year. It was a good month for democracy this last month. That's my joke I keep telling. We hope it'll be a good year for democracy, or really especially republicanism. And it's one that we at Claremont will play a big role in. I've spent the last couple of weeks on the phone trying to help a lot of our fellows get into the administration. They're all going to be doing good work. Keep an eye on, especially at the think tank at the State Department, which is going to be run by our colleague Mike Anton as Director of Policy Planning with a staff of 25 or so, many of whom will be former Claremont Fellows. So all good things to watch. We'll be writing about it a lot. Keep an eye out after the new year for a very uncontroversial and low temperature feature at the American Mind on the question of birthright citizenship, one we've been talking and writing and studying a lot at the Claremont Institute over the last 40 years or so. And then I'll just wrap by saying, please, we are taking 2 weeks off, but we would love to field some end of year questions. You can ask us about anything, and we will maybe have a show right when we come back, fielding the mailbag. So if you want to, forgive me ahead of time, Ryder and Andrew, you know who you are. You're going to field some of these. Write to media@claremont.org and just put it in the subject line, TAM Roundtable question. Ask us about anything large and small, transcendental or mundane, otherworldly or worldly, politics, culture, whatever. We'd love to get a little pulse of what everyone's thinking and what they want to know. So a Merry Christmas to everybody. And I look forward to whisking away Monday to North Florida with my kids, see my sister and her 4 kids and my parents. And I hope you all enjoy the holiday, and happy Hanukkah too. Starts on Christmas night.
For me, definitely this year, was definitely Trump's win. Going from, July 13th, the assassination attempt, then you had the second assassination attempt, Biden dropping out. That series of events, the first assassination attempt, Biden dropping out, that's one of the most, crazy, I think just 5 or 6 days in politics, probably in my lifetime. And then just to see, Trump obviously in the polls, clearly crushing Biden, him dropping out, Kamala coming in. You have obviously the wash, the narrative that, oh, she's going to win, the Seltzer poll in Iowa that Trump is actually now, I think, suing about. He won that successfully, a case against ABC and George Stephanopoulos. I think they paid $15-60 million because Stephanopoulos said some things that were factually inaccurate on air. So that is actually something, too, that's very important, to get some standard back, where people can't just simply say untruths and just act like it's all okay, especially in news media. They have to be better than that. Supposed in an age of fact checking, it's amazing just actually how much facts don't matter actually at all in any way, or they only matter, obviously for the regime, and you can lie and say whatever you want about the other side. But again, Trump's win is monumental. He was obviously Time Magazine's Person of the Year for good reason. And we just hope that, that this is certainly not the end of anything. This is just merely the beginning of something, of, a continued realignment, of really returning of power back to the people's hands, to recovery of self-government, going back to our founding principles. But we're not simply here at Claremont just pining for 1776. Politics is an ever-changing thing based on eternal principles and eternal truths, and that we need to get those things, but in our circumstances in 2024. What does that look like in 2024, especially with tech? We have to have control over AI, over those things. They cannot master us. We have to be master over them. All these bureaucracies need to be cut down to size so we actually know what's going on. So there's countless ways that our political principles inform reality. And Trump, winning in 2024, it just forwards that project. So I'm really, really excited about that. And then just really quickly for me, for Christmas this year, we actually usually do, my wife and I, a huge kind of 2-week circuit up to Cleveland with my parents, and then up to Michigan to her parents and back. With 2 young kids, we are not doing that this year. We're just going up to my parents for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, going to see my extended family. Just great to see them. I don't get to see them as much as I would like. And then we're going to go up to her parents just for a little bit, but certainly not for as long as we usually are. So we're greatly looking forward to that.
Excellent. And cheers to that. I myself will be hibernating like some kind of overfed bear. I'm not going anywhere but staying here in Nashville, Tennessee. Shout out to my buddy Giancarlo Sopo, who writes for us sometimes at the American Mind. He's going to be hosting a Cuban Christmas celebration. I've never experienced that. I understand that pulled pork is involved. And when he told me that, I said, I'm there. So I'll be doing that, then hopping over to visit my parents and my sister and her kids for a post-Christmas celebration. So we wish all of you the sincerest goodwill, a very, very merry everything. Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah. Hope you have a wonderful one. And just to reiterate Ryan's plug there, please do write in with your questions. Ask us anything. We would love to devote an episode or even 2 or 3 to things that you guys are wondering about and like to hear discussed on the show. So with that, one last time for 2024, thank you all very much for listening to the Roundtable. There will continue to be content posted at americanmind.org. You can find new essays there. And there's also a new, I would say, omnibus issue of the Claremont Review of Books arriving in your mailbox if it hasn't already, with essays by really the dream team, Charles Kessler, Christopher Caldwell, and William Bogley on the election, various aspects of that. I think that kind of triptych of essays is some of the best writing so far on what the election means and what might happen going forward. You can find that at ClaremontReviewOfBooks.com, and you can donate to support our work at claremont.org/donate. If you'd like to toss a Christmas gift our way, I certainly won't be the one to stop you. Finally, check out our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. And a very big, hearty thank you to the brothers G, Jake and Ryan Gannon, for making us sound so good, or at least okay, given the material that they may be working with. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will see you all in 2025.